welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For many years, I improvised a new bedtime story for my children every night. Now, with their permission, I'm sharing the recordings of the best of those stories with you. Right now, we're about halfway through a long story that I told during the pandemic lockdown of 2020 about a girl who attends an online school for adventuring named Myra. I hope that you enjoy it as much as we did. Myra looked at Chelsei. "What?" she said. "I think I found time," said Chelsei. "Really?" said Myra. "Who? Where?" "Come on," said Chelsei. "I'll show you." As Myra followed Chelsei across campus, Chelsei was saying, "So we were all out doing, sort of our survey of trying to see which buildings had runes?" "Yeah," said Myra. "And as I was walking between the grower dorm and the magicker dorm, it was about 3 o'clock and the clock started chiming," said Chelsei. "Yeah," said Myra. "And then it hit me. Where would I be if I were time? In the clock tower." "Okay," said Myra, now realizing that was where Chelsei was leading her. "So," said Myra. "So," said Chelsei, "I headed over and did a little exploring. The lock's nothing to speak of. And, well, I'll just show you." And she took her to the clock tower, and they glanced around, and then Chelsei, who had clearly already unlocked this door earlier, pulled open the door on the side of the tower, and Myra followed her in. It took her a few seconds for her eyes to adjust to the gloom, and then she could see that there was a stairwell leading around the inside of the clock tower in a spiral going up to the top. "Yeah," said Myra. "Well," said Chelsei, "you know how the bells ring?" "Yeah," said Myra. "Have you ever wondered who rings the bells?" "No," said Myra. "I assumed they were just automatic." "Me too," said Chelsei. "Come on," and started leading her up the stairs. It was when they were about halfway up the tower that Myra made the realization that there was a ceiling above them, and that they weren't near the top of the tower. They reached the point where the stairs disappeared up into the ceiling, and there was a trap door. Chelsei reached it first and sort of fiddled with the latch for a moment, and then it swung open. Myra followed her up and through. They were in a sort of living room with big comfy overstuffed chairs and books on shelves against all 4 walls. It was lit by tall slit windows on all 4 sides that were not very wide, but they were very tall and so admitted plenty of light to supplement the lamps that were burning. In a overstuffed chair in one corner sat an old and wizened man that Myra had never seen before. "This," said Chelsei, "is George. He's the caretaker and the bell ringer of the clock tower," she said, looking at Myra intensely. "Uh-huh," said Myra. "Nice to meet you, George." She walked over and stuck out her hand, and George shook it. "Nice to meet you, too," he said. "I don't get many visitors here in the clock tower." "I should imagine not," said Myra, "given that they keep all the doors locked, and haven't told anyone that you're here." "Well," said George, "that may be all right. I sort of prefer this life. It's very quiet. I get to do a lot of reading, and I love the routine of the bells. Sometimes I sit up at the top of the tower where I can look out across campus in all directions, and I love to watch the students moving from class to class. When I ring the bells to tell them it's time to get up or time to move to the next class, And when I'm not ringing the bells, I have my library. He waved his arm expansively. That's great, said Myra. So, if you don't mind me asking, how do you eat? Oh, I get supplies brought to me about once a week or so. Oh, really, said Myra. Do you mind if we sit down? Not at all, said George, and he waved to two overstuffed chairs. So, said Myra, do you like looking out at campus? Have you ever been out and explored? Oh, I'm sure I have, said George. Really, said Myra. She glanced over at Chelsei. Chelsei said, when was the last time you left the clock tower, George? George frowned. He said. Can't say as I could put a specific date on it. Okay, said Myra. So, can you show us the bells? Absolutely, said George, putting his book aside and standing up. Despite his aged appearance, he seemed to move with no difficulty at all. Myra said, well, lead on. And he walked over to the stairs that now circled up through another ceiling. They walked around the edges, ascending through a room that looked to be a kitchen and bathroom, and then another level above that appeared to be George's bedroom, and then climbing through the trapdoor above that, they found themselves up on the dizzying height of the top of the bell tower, with the huge bells hanging above them, and the belfry of the tower, and the great open windows looking out over campus in all directions. Myra was not inclined to vertigo. Fortunately, it was not a good failing for a sneaker. If you couldn't handle heights, you likely needed to find something else to do with your time. And she had to agree with George. It was quite the view. So, she said, is it bell ringing time yet? George said, no. It's another 20 minutes until I ring the 4 o'clock bells. Well, said Myra, it was really nice meeting you. So, hey, would you like to come for a walk around campus with us? Oh, I'd love to, said George. I really would. I'd like to see it, but duty calls, and in 20 minutes I've got to ring the bells, so I really don't have time to leave. Huh, said Myra. You don't ring the bells at night, though. I mean, you could come take a nighttime tour of campus with us. Oh, thank you, but I'm really a homebody, said George. I'm very content with my life here. If you girls would come visit me again sometime. Well, thanks, said Myra. It was really nice meeting you, George. And she shook his hand and followed Chelsei down the circular stairway through the various rooms of George's living quarters and then out through the bottom of the library. Myra stopped, and in the dim light of the interior of the tower, she scrutinized the edges of the trapdoor, running her hands around the frame, but finding nothing. She said. Not there, then. What are you looking for? Said Chelsei. The imprisonment runes, said Myra. If he's time, there's got to be runes that are keeping him here. Oh, you're right, said Chelsei. Hadn't thought about that. I should have. I mean, I was looking at all the buildings for runes. Right, said Myra. Well, they're not here, so he must have the run of the whole tower. We'll check at the bottom. And so they made their way down, more slowly this time, because they were looking at the steps and looking at the walls as they made their circular descent. And when they reached the bottom, they scrutinized the door to the outside to their utmost, but Myra could not find them. She wasn't sure whether it was just too dark, or whether she was looking in the wrong place. Finally, they heard the bells ringing above, reverberating down through the interior of the tower, and decided that they had best be going. They closed the door behind them and scrutinized the outside. Walking back to the dorm, Myra said, I don't know. Maybe he's just sort of the weird old friendly custodian of the tower. The room should be there. They're there for knowledge. They're there for life. Or maybe we're missing something, said Chelsei. Maybe, said Myra. Or maybe time is still somewhere else. How are we going to figure it out? Chelsei shrugged, and they walked the rest of the way back in silence. And that is the end for tonight. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was written by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Wendelin. If you're enjoying the show, please tell someone about it, and leave a review with your podcast provider. You can now subscribe to the show to get extra stories and longer chapters of Myra and the Online School that combine multiple segments into a longer episode. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.buzzsprout.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.